Welcome to the New Warehouse Podcast, the podcast for those that are curious about what's possible inside their four walls. Before we get into this episode, let's hear a word from our sponsors that make this all possible. How healthy is the storage in your warehouse? Have you ever walked the aisles looking for rack damage, empty pallets, or hanging pallet wrap? I know I've spent too much time doing that in my ops career. Now, there's a better answer from Dexery. Storage Health is their AI-powered check that runs with every robot scan that can detect damage, safety hazards, and hygiene issues across your warehouse at every height. Think damaged racking, pallet defects, tipped items, hanging shrink wrap, or damaged goods. Easily detected and alerted by Dexery's AI-powered platform while their robot scans your aisles. Stop missing these critical ops items and put Dexery's Storage Health to work for you at Dexery.com. That's DEXORY.com. Thank you to our sponsors, and now let's get to the podcast.
The New Warehouse Podcast, hosted by Kevin Lawton, is your source for insights and ideas from the distribution, transportation, and logistics industry. A new episode every Monday morning brings you the latest from industry experts and thought leaders. And now, here's Kevin.
Hey, it's Kevin with the New Warehouse Podcast, bringing you a new episode today. And on today's episode, we are going to dive into some supply chain technology, specifically within the four walls in the warehouse. And I'm going to be joined by Karli Sage. She is the Vice President of Supply Chain Management, Technology, and Engineering at Southern Glazer's Wine and Spirits. So we're going to talk a little bit about how does she approach technology within the four walls? How is she looking at some of the innovation that's happening in the space? And we're also going to concentrate on a specific project that they recently deployed and worked on with Corvus Robotics, which is utilizing drones to do inventory counting. And we're going to learn a little bit about that, how they kind of approach that, how they went about the journey of deployment, and really what are some of the benefits since they've deployed. So very interested in diving into this today with Karli and learning about their operations, of course. So Karli, welcome to the show. How are you?
Hi, I'm very good. Thank you. I'm glad to be here.
Yes, happy to get you on. Happy to talk about this. We love getting kind of the operator's perspective on some of the things that are happening in the industry as well. So happy that we can get you in here and talk about this specifically. So why don't we kick it off here for people that are not familiar with Southern Glazers? Tell us a little bit about what it is you all do and a little bit about kind of the operation side of things.
Absolutely. So Southern Glazers, some of you may know, may not know, we are the world's largest wine and spirits wholesaler. So we take all of the products that our suppliers allow us to have, and we distribute it to stores, retailers, places that consumers go to buy wine and spirits. So we are the largest. We fulfill every location, or at least 47 markets of the United States, some representation in Latin America, the Caribbean, and then, of course, North America, Canada. Everything that comes in, it's really more of a just-in-time model that we serve for our customers, which is the retail stores. And what we do is everything that comes in must go out. We turn our inventory quite frequently throughout the year, and that's something that we model ourselves on, and we drive a lot of our success on. So there's a lot of infrastructure within our buildings to make this happen. And we have to have a lot of conveyor and a lot of technology in order to do this.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's really interesting. And obviously, you know, we love our wine and spirits. I know I do. I got some like right behind me here on my my shelf, some Hennessy. So very interesting to hear a little bit about kind of the operations and also like the large market you serve. I don't think I realized that personally. So a lot going on there. So, you know, tell us a little bit about from the operations perspective, right? And dealing with wine and spirits. I mean, one, you know, it is heavy and there's some fragility to it as as well, because a lot of it's in glass bottles, right? But I imagine there's also some regulation things that come into play as well. So tell us a little bit about, from the operations perspective, like what are some of the differentiators, from somebody maybe that's shipping like paper towels, for example?
Oh, that's a big difference. You need paper towels to clean up some of the spills, maybe from wine and spirits, but other than that, they are completely different. So wine and spirits, right? We have so many different SKUs. I believe on average, our warehouses hold about 13,000 SKUs. We have more than that we sell. We have about 17,000 and counting the different types of SKUs that we have. So it's very, very complex. But some of the regulations that we have, and you may have caught on to it when I mentioned it the first time, is that we take all of the products from our suppliers and distribute it to our customers, in which we call retail stores or convenience stores. We don't actually ship products to our consumers, which are like yourself, myself, and others around there that like to drink wine and spirits, right? So that is one of the regulations. We are sitting perfectly in the middle of that three-tiered system where we do not produce our own wine and spirits, although that would be great, to be able to do our own thing. But we take everything that our suppliers do and we then distribute it to the retail stores. And that's really because we can't have suppliers produce, distribute all the way throughout the chain.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's really interesting to hear kind of that, because it is a little differentiator. Like, as you said, like you're not shipping directly to the consumer, but you're, replenishing those retail stores and I guess the liquor stores, grocery stores, et cetera, where these things are sold, to be able to do that. So now tell us a little bit about, as someone that heads up technology, specifically for supply chain itself. And we talk a lot about the technology, the innovation that's happening within the warehouse and the supply chain in general on this show. So I'm curious, how do you kind of navigate in today's market? Because it feels like there's just an abundance of solution options. There's a ton of technology coming in, ton of startups that are trying to do all these new things within, operations and warehousing. So how do you approach that? How do you kind of navigate just this plethora of options out there?
I will say the shiny object syndrome is a real disease,
Yeah.
and it it is very easy to get scooped up into it. The supply chain technology market today is very saturated with a lot of different suppliers, and I say suppliers from the technology perspective, different vendors that are actually creating the same, if not very similar, technologies, right? And then it actually puts a lot of pressure on folks like myself, teams that I run, and other companies in similar boats to know what's out there and understand it and be able to read between the lines. So I would say, 10, 15 years ago, there were a handful of vendors out there and they really differentiated themselves between what they offered. And is kind of where integrators really started to become the big power, because they could bring different markets together and provide one whole end-to-end solution. Now, what we're seeing when we go to these trade shows is 15, 20, 30 different startups, or even, integrators are starting to create their own types of technologies in this space now. And we have to read between the lines to say what's actually effective. Who has actually done something in this industry and in this space? Because if you are distributing paper towels, paper goods, anything that is not within wine and spirits, it's very hard for us to say this is an apples to apples solution or an apples to apples technology that would be able to solve our problems. So, with the way that technology and supply chain is growing, it's very difficult for us on our side to be able to implement what is really effective. And that's one of the biggest changes I've seen over the last few years.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, it's really interesting to hear that perspective. And I love that you said it's not quite like apples to apples with other type of product that's been solved for. So when you're looking at some of these solutions, you're not necessarily saying like, okay, well, it worked for like this product category. That doesn't necessarily mean it's going to work for us. So what, I guess, what is the what is the differentiator, the challenge there? Is it because the product is a little more fragile because it is like in glass predominantly, or is it from a regulations perspective? Like what is the difference where you can't say like, okay, well, these are palletized products. We have palletized products, but it doesn't quite align from an apples to apples perspective. Like, what is that difference there? The big difference.
The biggest differences that stand out between our products and others is, yes, the fragile component of it being glass. The second is we have so many SKUs, and each one of those SKUs has a very unique box associated with it. So rather than most companies having two or three, maybe five templates of case boxes that their product goes into, every single SKU has its own box. So we're looking at the thousands. So we need to be able to make sure that technology that's out there can accommodate the variables that our industry serves. And then the most important one is we take a lot of pride in servicing our customers. And we have spent many decades saying, we will get your order to you tomorrow. I know everyone was very excited when Amazon came out with the Prime Day, 2-day guarantee. It
Mhm.
went into same day guarantee, right? We've been doing this for a very long time. We make sure that our customers get the wine and spirits that they need because it's very critical to the parties that we celebrate, the moments that we create, and
Sure.
we are really the provider of that. And something that's shocking is a lot of the technology providers out there, it is hard to achieve those rates that we need in order to get everything to our customers next day. Some of our facilities are doing 70, 100,000 cases a night, right? When you
Wow.
look at some of those autonomous technologies, mobile robots, case picking solutions, they're unable to produce at that speed. And so, therefore, we need to run longer, right? So, that's the biggest challenge for us. But if we don't have the ability to run longer and we need something within the same time window that we're solving for now, that's the biggest challenge that we're facing. And it's very difficult to say that you can compare that across all industries.
Yeah, very interesting there, and very interesting to hear about I mean, the amount of different cases that you talked about. I never thought about that, so it's kind of fascinating to hear like that. That is a big variability within the operations that presents, I guess, challenges for some of these technology solutions to be able to handle that amount of variability within there, and fascinating too to hear about the speed of delivery and doing 100,000 cases at a operation overnight. I mean, tell us a little bit about like how many facilities do you have throughout North America to be able to be close to the customer and make those deliveries fairly quickly. I mean, what does the kind of network footprint look like?
I would say the markets that we operate in are the states that we operate in. And that is really because of the regulations. We cannot cross state lines when we distribute alcohol. So that is a huge thing for everyone involved because that means for us to be able to have a position in that market, we really need to have a warehouse in that market and a division out there. And so we pride ourselves on making sure that we can supply every division that we're in order for us to grow.
Oh wow. So like 40 plus, I think you said like 47 different markets. So I mean, that's a ton of operations to look at and a ton of operations to consider when looking at some of these solutions as well. And how does that look from an overall perspective? I think that's pretty fascinating to hear. I'm not necessarily envious, but the complexity that I imagine comes with that. And I think it really interesting to hear that. So now tell us, I mean, in the market right now, I mean, what is just the technology landscape overall? I'm curious, like what your view is on that, because we see, obviously we see a ton of stuff with automation, we see a ton of stuff with robotics, and obviously, we can't leave out AI, right? I mean, that's all over the place now, not only just for the warehouse, but supply chain in general. So I'm curious, like what is your take and what is your view on just the overall like supply chain technology landscape at the current moment here in 2026?
The technology landscape, at least for Southern, within our warehousing area, we are actually the most advanced, I would say, and one of the highest advanced in the wine and spirits industry. If you were to compare us, though, however, to manufacturing, that's not the same, right? Because we have so much variability in our products that we're delivering. Whereas if you build a car, it's the same model every single time, right? So we actually tend to lean towards fixed technology and fixed automation, so such as conveyor systems, sorting systems, different types of merges and accumulations. And what we're finding now, though, is we can take that and combine it with some of these collaborative robots and some of these other smaller automated technology services that would allow us to take the really high speeds of what a conveyor can bring to us and then pair it with something that will reduce the amount of strain on the human body. So that's where we're really focusing a lot of our technology now, is to make sure that the enjoyment of these warehouse environments is actually for our people. We want to have everybody come to work every day and say they enjoy working in the environment that they do. And in order for us to do that, it's to reduce a lot of the safety concerns by using some of these new technologies that are out there.
Yeah, yeah, and I think that's a really great approach, and that makes a ton of sense, right? Because I mean, I've lifted a case of wine and case of spirits before, and they're not light, right? They're heavy. So I imagine people having to do that work every single day, whether it's building pallets, unloading trucks, or whatever the case may be. I mean, I think it's a great approach to think about that, and how can we leverage some of these technologies and automation to reduce some of that heavy lifting, and obviously from the safety perspective, probably reduce some of those strain and things that can creep up over time with that repetitive lifting. So really interesting to hear that. And now we're gonna talk about a specific project that you've worked on recently with Corvus Robotics. So tell us a little bit about kind of what was like the problem or the challenge that you were facing within the operations that led you to start to look at solutions like Corvus Robotics, or what was kind of the problem set that you were dealing with?
So our warehouses are quite large and we have a ton of SKUs. So the biggest problem that we had is we were spending a lot of time cycle counting locations, but not really making up any ground by finding missing product, missing pallets, or just, getting that wall to wall that was required every 90 days for auditing purposes, right? So it was very important for us, for the integrity of our business and the support that we provide our suppliers, to make sure that we have all of the product that we say we have. So we found an opportunity to not only reduce some of the safety concerns, right? Because when you are cycle counting very high locations, you actually have to be harnessed in, and you need to reach over and move boxes. And if you can imagine reaching above your head or leaning over and picking up boxes that are 50 plus pounds, doing that at a very high level is risky. Okay. So we found an opportunity for us to streamline that process, right? Allow for a drone to go out there, take pictures and videos of our inventory, and stream it back to a centralized location on the ground for then our cycle counters and inventory clerks to validate. And by doing this, we've been able to speed up the process, because what takes, someone a few minutes to go and do, we can get done in a couple of seconds. So because of this, we've been able to solve the problem of finding missing product quicker and having higher integrity of our product throughout our warehouse, which then not only supports our suppliers' beliefs in us to be the number one wholesaler and provider of wine and spirits in the nation, but also our customers. We are no longer shorting products. We are giving them everything that they ordered because we have better visibility.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think as a former inventory control manager, I definitely know that pain specifically, and had multiple cycle counters working for me as well, and had them high up in the racks, as you just said, trying to count. And when they get up to the top level and there's a pallet somebody put away and it's not a complete pallet, and obviously they don't position it in the right way to be able to get full visibility, it does get a little precarious up there, right? Trying to tweak their head around and see like, is this, are there really this many cases missing, etc., and figure out those counts. So I mean, I think it's a great use case, right, to be able to, like you said, get those counts faster, right, and be able to attack that. And I love the approach of automated inventory counting, because I think that we spend so much time cycle counting locations that are are right versus, spending time managing the exceptions and figuring out like, well, why do we actually have issues in the first place, right? Where we could devote more time to those exceptions themselves. So tell us a little bit about, because there's a couple different options on the market for addressing this kind of thing. So tell us a little bit about, how did you assess the different solutions in the market, and then ultimately end up choosing Corvus Robotics? Like, what was the differentiator that kind of landed you with Corvus?
So there are a ton of drone companies out there, and I don't want to say one is better than the other. We really enjoy Corvus, but it all comes down to what you need that provider to do for you. So we needed something that was going to be completely autonomous. And when I say that, I mean some of the drone companies still require a person to be assigned to that drone so that when it's flying, there is somebody walking with it. Somebody is managing the drone, right? In our case, well, we said, how can we get to a position and who's out there that would allow us to fly these drones without somebody tailing it, right? We're not taking the drone for a walk. We're asking the drone to cycle count, right? There's a couple different approaches there. That, and we wanted to make sure that we could fly it during off hours. And so if you had to bring someone in for overtime or during off shifts, then that cost goes up, right? And the whole point was, how can we make sure that we're doing this effectively, efficiently, and what's best for the company? The second reason that the second thing we were looking for in this case was full integration capabilities between what the drone sees and captures and then our warehouse management systems. So there were a couple of companies out there that said, yes, in the future, we can definitely put this together for you. We can offer these integrations as an upgrade. We can do, X, Y, and Z when you want it, right? I said, well, I want it now. Oh, okay. Well, we're not quite ready. Okay, so that's different. You can do it for me. You just can't do it now. Okay, not a problem. We'll come back if for some reason we can't find another company that can do it now. And well, the one thing that Corvus said is, yes, we can do that, and we can do it now for you. And I said, great, let's give it a shot, right? So if we can have autonomous drones flying around in the dark when no one's around, and they can send data back into our warehouse management system, it automatically creates cycle count tasks for us for things that are high exception rate based on the number of cases that are incorrect and also the monetary value of those cases. So we've been able to completely customize how we use Corvus, and that has been the biggest game changer and one of the major reasons why we went with them.
Yeah, and I think that's really interesting to kind of get almost like a peek behind the curtain a little bit, like on kind of the decision making there and like the assessment. I think it's really interesting to hear too, because as you mentioned earlier in the conversation, like there's some unique variability that happens within your operations there. So to be able to kind of define that and, like as you said, kind of customize to your needs and tailor that, I think is really a good testament to why you ultimately decided on Corvus itself. So I think it's really interesting to hear, and obviously, interesting to hear about the autonomous flights that can happen off hours and even in the dark, as you imagine, which is a additional cost savings, right, on the light and electric bill, I'm sure as well. So really interesting to hear that. So now tell us a little bit about like the deployment, and you said you have a lot of operations, right? One in almost like every market, every state out there. So tell us a little bit about, what has the deployment been like? What has the rollout been like? Is this in one facility, multiple facilities? How deep are you going on this?
We have it in about 9 facilities, and we did that over the course of 18 months. Our pilot facility took the longest because what you don't know, and you can't solve for. So we took the most time there, and then we decided to expand and to roll it out. And all of the sites that we have it in now in all those markets, they are loving it because they can get full wall to walls in 2 weeks or less, which is incredible, right? So the amount of visibility. I will say though, getting to that point, it did take some time. And that is, again, because we are new in this space. We've never done drones before, but we wanted to make sure that we did it right the first time. So the first pilot took about 9 months for us to get off and to really see the results that were driving the decision to expand. But now that we are seeing those results, we've gone into 9 markets and we plan on going into, I think if there's another 10 that are planned for the next 12 months out.
Nice. And interesting to hear that too. And I love that you're like, well, the first one, like we want to get it right. So let's take our time. Let's get it done. I think that's like a really smart approach, especially when you have like a large network like you have, that I'm sure you're hoping to roll out, and that this will be a solution kind of across the board, like to be able to do that. So I'm curious, like on the, we talk about autonomous things and, robotics and all these things going on, but tell us a little bit about kind of like the human element of it. Like what was the kind of change from the traditional cycle counter approach? How did that shift how some of those processes were happening within the operations? And I guess like, what did you do with the cycle counters as well? Are they just focusing on exceptions now, or what did that kind of evolution of the human element of the process look like?
So we still have all of the cycle counters that are working with all of the Southern Glazers sites and facilities out there. And one of the interesting things that we did was throughout our warehouses, we have many aisles of racking, and one drone can service many aisles at one time. So what we did is we said, hey, because the drones are a little bit particular about a lot of the stringers that are on the pallets, right? With the amount of air that is going into those drones, it can actually rip off some of those stringers, some of that stretch wrap. And if it does that, it ruins the blades, right? So we said, hey, well, why don't we assign a cycle counter to a drone, and we make sure that they take ownership over those number of aisles. And by doing that, there's a lot of pride and ownership in, well, these are my aisles. I keep them clean. I keep the stringers cut. I run the exceptions in here, and I have a little bit of tie back to the company. We've seen a huge amount of improvement on the warehouse cleanliness and then also the effectiveness of the drones. Among that, we also use our cycle counters now to cycle count our pick mods. So our pick mods are where the product then goes from those pallets directly to our conveyor system. So as you can imagine, reserve counting is great, but cycle counting that close to the action of what's going to be serviced to our customers is another huge benefit, because sometimes we put things in the wrong place. We're all human. Okay, so that happens. Or maybe someone shouts over to us, "Hey, so and so, don't forget this later," and you grab from the wrong pallet, right? It happens. So for us to be able to cycle count up there, it really, really narrows in the amount of risk that we have to give the wrong product to our customers. And then, of course, returns or salvage or damage, things like that. We've applied those cycle counters to those functions as well to get that into our warehouses for resale. And it's full circle where we've kind of allowed everybody to go towards those higher value activities, which brings more benefit to the employees as well as the company.
Yeah, and I think that's fantastic to hear kind of how you've done that, and I love that they're like tied to like these set of aisles, like, and I own these aisles. I think it's probably taking the 5S to like the 10th degree. I'm sure those aisles are looking like fantastic, and there's no plastic wrap hanging or anything like that. Would love to see that sometime. But I think and really interesting too, and I love that you took them and said like, okay, well let's put more concentration, more focus on the pick mods, because that makes total sense, right? Because I mean, that is like a high touch environment, right? So the more, high touch level and frequency of movement, like obviously that's where there's more susceptibility or risk that there could be a potential inventory discrepancy. And then taking those cycle counters and also putting them towards the returns and making sure that product can get back into sale, right? I mean, typically your cycle counters are going to be the most detailed people and focus. So returns needs that kind of level of attention as well. So really interesting to hear that and how you've kind of gone about that, because I think there's a lot of question for people of like, okay, well, we bring in some autonomous solutions and things, and how do we navigate like the people that were doing that job before, or like what do they become, right? Or how do we reposition them? And I think this is like a fantastic example. So I'm happy you shared that with us here to hear that. So now tell us a little bit about, because you've deployed now, like you said, a decent amount of locations and plans to do more, right? So obviously you like the solution, it sounds like. So tell us a little bit about, when you deployed, whether it was, after that first pilot or, a couple other locations after that. I mean, what were some of the improvements? What were some of like the results that you saw once you were deployed with this?
So the biggest improvement that we have seen is the wall-to-wall visibility Like I said before, we can count almost every warehouse within 2 weeks. That's every single reserve location. The other benefits are the amount of hours that we've freed up for our cycle counters to be able to go and do these higher value tasks. That again, in those high touch areas, that's the last stop before our customer. I mean, really, outside of loading the
Mm.
truck, we want to make sure that that has all eyes on it, and we do the best we can to service our customers. The other benefits we've seen is we've actually found about, I think, 30,000 ish or so opportunities across the divisions that we've installed these Corvus drones, where we may have been a case short or we may have found missing pallets.
Oh,
That's actually something we do a lot of in our locations. So we can actually search for a product by the SKU number, by description, and it will tell you every single location that pallet has been in or that SKU has been in over the last 2 weeks. And that's incredible. So we are able to find so much more product so much quicker. And because of that, that's probably the biggest savings that we've seen. Now, we saw savings in terms of hours spent cycle counting in our first pilot location, but with the remaining 9 locations that we deployed, that's when we really saw things come to life. And it's really allowed us to take it to the next step where we said, okay, these 9 locations, it may have been more of a pilot versus a proof of concept in our first site.
mm.
Now we know that it's completely scalable and it's absolutely the direction we want to go.
Yeah, and I think that's such a fantastic result. I mean, 30,000 instances. I mean, that's great, right? I mean, because I think about my days of going around the warehouse like trying to find missing product. I mean, it can take forever, right? I mean, it takes you like. I always would tell
Yeah.
people, it takes just a few seconds to put something in the wrong spot. But it could take like weeks to actually find it and figure out like what happened to that product itself. So the ability to get that wall to wall every 2 weeks, like you said, and being able to have that further visibility, I think that only trickles down to a better customer experience as well, right? Because when you have a missing case or a missing pallet or a misplaced pallet or something, inevitably somehow that's going to impact the customer experience at some point if you can't find that quickly. So it really interesting to kind of hear your experience there and the approach to it as well, and kind of how you've navigated the human element too. I think that's really fascinating. So really appreciate you kind of sharing that experience with us, the experience so far, as it sounds like you're going to be rolling out more too into the future. Now tell us, I mean, from your perspective, for people that are looking at this type of technology, because as you mentioned, right, you never dealt with drones before, and most people haven't, right? There's still a lot of operations out there that are still doing the traditional cycle counting, as we talked about. What advice would you give people as they're maybe considering these solutions or learning about the potential that these solutions could have for them?
So if you're considering this solution, I would say make sure your master data is up to snuff. Any
Mm,
data that you put into these drones, it's going off of that to do the validations. So if you don't have good master data, clean that up before you even approach one of these companies. We spend a lot of time doing that, and it becomes exhaustive when you have multiple people in the mix, right? When you can do it ahead of time. And then, of course, going back to the cleanliness of the warehouse. So these drones, there's about 4 blades on them. They can suck up anything, right? So if you have paper flying around, if you have LPNs, if you have tails on these pallets, make sure you are prepared to clean that up and you set that expectation with your teams to make sure that the warehouse lives at a different level, a different standard. Getting all of that ahead of time will make it a lot easier to do any type of deployment. And then also be ready for the change. You have to have a game plan. What is going to happen to these team members? Where are we going to put them? How are we going to reuse them? What is the goal out of this, right? Yes, we're solving for a problem, but what is the main goal? Is it to provide better visibility and to provide better accuracy at your pick mods? Is it to provide better customer service? Is it to provide what, right? Cleaning up cycle counting is one thing, but our biggest target was how do we use the team that we have now to do better everywhere else? And that is one of the things, if you don't have that in mind, you'll solve a problem, but you won't really solve the big problem.
yeah, I love that, and I think that I think it is really good point there that you made, because I actually just had a conversation at a conference with somebody about this, where they're piloting an AMR, like pallet jack style, and like you said, like, going into it, like your data has to be clean, right? But like your warehouse also has to be clean too as well. Like you said, if there's obstructions and things like that, it's going to cause issues for the robots or the autonomous devices themselves, in this case drones. And she shared as well that, like, all right, they're piloting this pallet jack, but if they lift up the pallet or it tries to engage with the pallet and there's like a little piece of plastic wrap hanging, well, the robot doesn't realize that, like, the forks can just go straight through that plastic. It just thinks it's an obstruction, right? So I think it's a great kind of real time use case. And like, all right, well, it's not bringing in these solutions and they're just going to fix everything, right? You have to kind of level up and optimize your operations to get the full benefit of the solution at the end of the day, and be able to do that. So I love that you shared that, and I love that you talked about kind of, the plan for the people, and what are we trying to accomplish overall? Like, what is the why, right, of the approach and the goal here? I'm curious I imagine you deal with this a lot as someone who's focused on technology, right? The change management aspect. How do you communicate, like, the change and the why to the people on the floor? Like, I guess in this case, the cycle counters, like, going into this project, not being like, oh, tomorrow we're going to have drones in the warehouse, right? I'm sure there was more communication ahead of that. So tell us a little bit about, like, how did you communicate that, and how did you also make them feel like, all right, like, there's still going to be a place for me?
Yes, I wish it was as easy to say, hey, tomorrow we're going to have drones and that's it. And everyone just loves it. It doesn't work that way. So for us, we really focused on what do we need to communicate that some of the problems are in our warehouses, right? It's not that cycle counting is slow. That's not the problem, right? The problem that we have is we need to know where all of our inventory is at all times. And we need to be able to account for the inventory, because inventory is dollars. It's money. It's what you own, right? If you can't account for it, then where is it and what is it doing? And how do you best manage that? So it's all about, how do we take care of our company and how do we take care of our site? Because each of our divisions runs on its own P&L. So there's a lot of pride there around making sure that that warehouse is fully accounted for. Talking to the team members about that, saying, hey, we need to make sure that our numbers meet our numbers. We need to make sure that we can account for all of our inventory. We need to make sure we can service our customers. One of the opportunities that we've identified as a way to make this happen is a automated drone that will, A, make it safer for you, B, reduce a lot of the strain that you have by going up into those high bay areas to cycle count, and C, make it easier for you to do your job, right? And then it also allows you, because everyone out there has dreams and goals and hopes to do something more and something bigger every day, right? This allows us to take those individuals and put them into that stretch project that proves to them, we see you and we see what you're capable of and what you can do. And now do you see it in yourself? So a lot of that, those types of communications, and a lot of that went out there. A, it's about the company and about having that pride for your division. B, it's about you. Show us what you can do. We believe in you, and that's why you're here today, and that's why you're going to be here tomorrow. So let's make this work for everyone.
Wow, I couldn't have put it better myself. That's like, if anybody's listening, I mean, that's like the blueprint to communicate to your employees right there on any change. I think that's fantastic. And love that the approach and the culture is there to be able to support that and be able to have that type of communication. And I think obviously, in the conversation today as well, you demonstrated how you thoughtfully thought about those employees. Like, how are we going to leverage them, and how do we utilize them? What does their job evolve into? And I think that's such a key aspect as we see kind of this huge kind of technology shift within operations, and how do we navigate that that autonomous and human balance over the course of this evolution. So really a pleasure to talk to you today, Karli, and learn about not only the Corvus deployment itself, but just your overall approach approach to the technology that's happening within the four walls, and also the human element there too. I think really fantastic to hear about how you've approached that from your perspective in the organization overall as a whole. So really appreciate you joining us and sharing your insights here and your experiences as well. If people are interested in maybe learning more from you or learning more about Southern Glazers, what's the best way to do that?
We are very prominent on the web within LinkedIn and all of those other areas. So happy to answer any questions. I do a little circuit of the trade shows, and sometimes people recognize me. And I had someone stop me last year and they said, "Oh my gosh, I saw you at the Gartner conference," and all this kind of stuff. And so even if I'm not speaking or I'm not out there, it doesn't mean you can't say hi, right? So stop me anytime and be happy to talk with you about whatever you'd like to know on drones or technology.
All right, fantastic. And we'll definitely put the website for Southern Glazers as well as the LinkedIn in the show notes here and at thenewwarehouse.com. So Karli, it's been an absolute pleasure to talk to you today. So thank you once again for joining us on the show.
You've been listening to the New Warehouse Podcast with Kevin Lawton. Subscribe and check us out online at thenewwarehouse.com.
Enjoyed this episode? Make sure you are subscribed to the podcast, and for more content from the New Warehouse, find us on LinkedIn and YouTube. Links to subscribe can be found in the show notes, and for everything The New Warehouse, head to thenewwarehouse.com.